our world just exploded. My husband and I just, and you, as a dentist, you need to go eventually get back to work and face people. And he was very, very well known. We were in a small town, very well known in the community. So, every day we had all these wonderful patients that would come to, express their concern for us. And I was getting through that time. I kind of felt I was going to be stuck in the bottom of the grief pit the rest of my life.
At which point did did you have to dig in a little bit deeper into the spiritual side of things?
Holy cow. That's the whole thing. It's that
Mm.
spiritual side of things that give me my purpose.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today we have Kim with us. She is the author of Are You Ready? How to Build a Legacy to Die For. She is a widow, an author, and deals around the information around death and grief and how to, I believe, from what I'm seeing, how to kind of find empowerment through going through that process. So we're going to talk about all kinds of different things today, but thank you so much, Kim, for being on the show today.
It's great to be here, Joe. Thank you.
I so much appreciate it. So, as I mentioned just before we started talking, the Soul Inspired really is around. I talk to a lot of people who have literally died and come back from that. Speak to a lot of people who've lost loved ones and the experiences they've had. So, this really fits into that because that's even though that's more the spiritual side, you're coming at it from the humanistic side, it seems like, and we can speak more on that. But one of the first questions I like to get a little bit of information from you because I know you've done a lot of things in your life, but just kind of want to know what kind of led you down this path of working with people through grief.
Well, I lost my mother to suicide when I was 17. And then I lost my son. My husband and I were dentists. We practiced together in Farmington, Minnesota. And when my son Eric was 19, he was a student at Columbia University and just everything. He was on top of the world. He'd been a National Merit Scholar. He was elected to student government at Columbia University. He was a jazz pianist. He went there because he liked to play jazz piano and study engineering at the same time. It's about the only place he could do that. He was on top of the world. He came home after the first semester, just so happy, made the dean's list, just couldn't be happier. And then 2 weeks into his second semester, and 45 minutes after the breakup with his girlfriend, he took his own life just as my mother had done when I was 17. And our
Um,
world just exploded. My husband and I just, and you, as a dentist, you need to go eventually get back to work and face people. And he was very, very well known. We were in a small town, very well known in the community. So, every day we had all these wonderful patients that would come to, express their concern for us. And I was getting through that time. I kind of felt I was going to be stuck in the bottom of the grief pit the rest of my life. And I had an amazing encounter with one of my husband's cousins who came up to me, wagging his finger in my face a couple of months after we lost our son. And he said to me, "Don't you ever let your remaining children feel that they are not enough." And it just hit me like a lightning bolt because he had lost his brother at about the
okay.
same age and he felt he lost his parents as well. And I realized I was headed down that path because when you have a catastrophic loss like that, you think you're in the bottom of the pit sucking up the mud trying to, just get out of bed in the morning, which is when you find out that, your reality is your worst nightmare, really hard to function. But he, with that statement in his story, allowed me to realize that, oh my gosh, I've got two beautiful daughters and a husband that need me. I got to fight my way out of this thing. And it gave me the motivation and the drive to fight, fight, fight to get out of that grief pit. And it's clawing, it's fighting. You go up and you come down, you go up. And anybody that's been through a catastrophic loss knows how that is.
Yeah.
And, finally, I was able to kind of breathe fresh air again and live in the present. And it took a long time. It was hard. It's hard for everybody, but my main message really is that it can be done. And then 4 years ago, I lost my husband, Jim.
Mm.
I feel to a broken heart from losing our son. It was really hard for all of us. And at that time, I realized I'm currently 68. At the time, so I was 64. I thought, okay, I had been taking care of my husband for the last few years. I had, we were retired, and I had to figure out, what do I do now? What's my purpose now? And that faces, that's a lot of widows face that, widows and widowers. You're alone for the first time. I got married at 19. I've been married for 44 years, and now I wake up alone, and you have to manage that, and you have to figure things out. And you find yourself, for women, we find ourselves in that valley between menopause and death. So it's like, what the heck? What am I going to do now? And I just began, just like I did, starting over from when my son died, trying to figure out, what I can do. What's my purpose? What can I do to find joy in life again? And I've been working through that. I have fortunately have grandchildren that just give me so much joy. And I now have kind of realized I'm half-time with one set of grandkids in Minnesota, and I'm here in Kansas City. I'm going to be moving down here half-time for my grandchildren down here, so I can be with both of them. That's one of my purposes. But another purpose is to help people. Again, I've had 3 catastrophic losses, and I also became, after 30 years as a dentist, I had nerve damage in my drilling fingers, and I was the major support for my family, and I had to stop working overnight. So I've had a lot of things happen to me, and I just am here really to help people understand, when you're in the bottom of that pit and you're sucking up the mud and you think you're going to be there the rest of your life, it's possible, but it takes a lot of work. You got to fight to get out. And that's my main message. So I wrote actually several books. I wrote Naomi and the Widows Club. It's a book for widows, a devotional for widows to help them get through. And then my most recent book is Are You Ready? How to Build a Legacy to Die For, which explores not only building a legacy, which is love. Legacy is not the money. I don't talk about the money legacy. You can go to financial planners for that. It's about living the legacy of love, education, the things I'm trying now to leave my grandchildren, going to their basketball games, helping them dribble. I mean, all those things that you can do to improve the lives of the people that you love around you, no matter who they are, whether you have grandchildren or no grandchildren. And then most importantly, because I didn't really know this, all the stuff you got to do before you die to leave your family in a good place, to leave them emotionally strong. So you got to get all your affairs in order, because you got to do that, or it's a mess for them to have a figure out. You got to get rid of your stuff, which is painful as a baby boomer. I don't want to get rid of my stuff, but you need to do things, get rid of your emotional baggage, forgive, reconcile, let go of your ego, make your relationships are more important than your ego, get rid of that. And when I go, my hope is I have a little 3-ring binder with everything that kids are ever going to need for me. When I die, they'll be grieving for me, but I hope they remember when they open up that book that I thought about them. I love them. I even have a little love note stuck in there, so that they are strong and secure for the next generation. So leaving that legacy is leaving that part of yourself to help strengthen the next generation and hopefully have a softer landing. I know that was a long version, but I got on a
No,
roll.
no, I appreciate you sharing all that. And yeah, I have a bunch of questions that have, of course, come up through your speaking there. But what I was going to say, first of all, is clearly, if you lost your mother at such an early age, and then you went through this a number of times, you had to find over and over the resilience to come back from the loss. And so I can see why it's important that you feel you want to spread this message, because some people go through one loss and that does them in. It's so incredibly powerful to them that they can't seem to come out of it. And you've done it four times, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So because your mother, then your son, well, then it was your husband eventually. So it was 3 times, right? But
Well,
you've,
my job, I mean, my career, as
oh,
a
your
dentist,
career, right, right.
I
So
was
yeah,
president. I was president of the Minnesota. I was the first woman president of the Minnesota Dental Association, a spokesperson for the ADA, and
wow.
I couldn't practice anymore. So I had so much of my identity tied up. And of course, that was secondary. In fact, when that happened, I called my pastor and I was crying to him on the phone, like, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? I'm the support of my family. My husband was sick, and he said, "Well, Kim, it's not the worst thing that's ever happened to you." And he was right. So it wasn't, that's kind of a subcategory, but it does help when you lose your job, I mean, grief could be from losing a lot of things, but losing my identity in my profession, that dental degree took a lot of work to get there, and building up the practice and all the things that we did. So losing all of that, I've lost my identity many times. And I think people lose their identity many times, even in a normal life without tragedy. We become empty nesters, and 75% of women become widows. We retire and think life's going to be great, and we don't have a plan. So many things happen where we have to redefine ourselves, and I think that's what I'd like to help people do.
Wow. I wanted to ask you, because of the nature again of the podcast, at which point did you have to dig in a little bit deeper into the spiritual side of things?
Holy cow. That's the whole thing. It's that
Mm,
spiritual side of things. It gives me my purpose. It gives me my purpose. I feel I'm a Christian. That's my spiritual side.
mhm,
I know there's a lot of different beliefs. And for me, the Holy Spirit is what strengthens me. Our faith has the joy of the Lord is your strength. Our faith tells us that joy through all things. What the heck? How can you have joy through all things? It seems crazy, but I'm kind of living it now, and it's a
mhm.
beautiful place to be. And I like this morning, I got up and I sang good morning to all my little grandchildren. I'm staying with my daughter for a little bit before I find a place. And what a joy that was. What a joy that was. So through my faith, through the soul part, living with joy is unbelievable, because I lived with fear for most of my life. I lived with grief. I lived with trauma. That's not a real good place to be. But living with joy is a great place to be. And joy doesn't depend on circumstances. Joy is something that just stays in you.
You you clearly got through a lot when you talk about your faith, right? Because again, a lot of people who are on the show, I'm not putting words in anyone's mouths or anything here, but and I'm sure we do have a lot of Christians on the channel. We have people of all different faiths, but
Sure.
a lot of people would define themselves as spiritual, especially the ones who crossed over, even though some people do cross over and have experiences that are more around their um, religious beliefs.
Right, right.
And a lot of them come back and they they get a new lease on life. They get a better understanding of what they're doing in their life. And I look at what you did, and it seemed like yourself and your husband both lived very, very, uh, I mean, all jobs can be professional, but some jobs, being doctors, dentists, certain jobs take a lot more
Mhm.
time. And what starts to happen is your life starts to become that. So that
Yes.
identity factor is even higher because more of you're spending more time in practice than you are in your own personal life. And so when something catastrophic happens to begin with, it would I would assume that it would shake everything up even more because you're just in your day to day. You're not ever taking that time. And I'm not saying you weren't taking your time for your own spiritual or your faith, but I think that happens. I think that's very common. So do you recommend people finding that earlier on to make it easier to go through those losses? Because I'm just assuming it would be like massive shock, almost like a culture shock when something comes along that you weren't expecting.
Yes, and in my book, the second chapter, I talk about death and dying. I explore all the different spiritual beliefs, and I think um, that the most important thing is to feel that you're more than just the physical realm. You're more than that, and I talk about near death experiences and so on. I've never had one. I've had some kind of few interesting experiences after deaths of people that I love, but none of that. But I think that one of the most important things, and one thing I'm trying to present to my grandkids, is to understand that there is so much more in your soul. You're not just this physical thing. Material things are not important. In fact, the research will tell you that the greatest predictor of happiness, bar none, is not material wealth, or it's your relationships with other people. It's that connecting of the souls with other people, and developing deep relationships with other people and caring about other people. And I think that exploring that and having, whether you call it a faith or a belief system, or the universe, I mean, whatever you call it, I think it's important to have a a belief out there that there's more than what we see here. And
Mhm.
that really is helpful. It's very helpful in trying to move forward. And for me, it's very helpful in giving a purpose. I think a faith or a belief gives you a guide. And when you're in the bottom of that pit, sucking up the mud, if you can have a guide, you can
Mhm.
like, okay, I'm going to read this today, and oh, this speaks to me, and I'm going to go up a notch in the pit. I think having a guide of some sort is very helpful, and
Yeah.
it's been just incredibly helpful to me.
I think the word lost comes to me. I grew up in with a father whose side of the family was all Catholic, so religious, and then a mother's side who didn't really have a belief system. I think my mother, if she would have leaned towards anything, it would have been like Buddhism or something. And so there was this kind of difference between the two sides. And then I had separated parents, and um, I wasn't given any type of faith. I wasn't baptized. I later in my life I decided to go a certain route, but it was in my early 20s, and so I grew up very confused, and and it's okay to make those decisions for your kids because you want your kids to make decisions on their own and find their own faith. So I don't hold my mother accountable for that or anything. But I think there were times where when I started to ask the question of what are we in my teenage years, it contributed to the anxiety I was already having as a teenager and set me off into this very anxious state. So I'm always curious about people's faith and if it grounds them. Because when you don't have that grounding cord, you can feel lost. You can feel a little bit like, you can even have that idea of, well, what's the purpose? What's even the reason to do this? And that's not a good place to be either. So it is good to have that as a backing. So I appreciate you sharing on that. Now, you also said living with joy.
Mhm.
Now that sounds great.
Mhm.
But if someone is in that place right now where they've just lost someone or they've lost everyone, you know, maybe someone didn't even have kids and they've gotten older and their friends and family and everyone's gone. What would be a first step? What would someone do to get themselves out of the mud if they're finding themselves in a place of no joy so that they're not going through that alone?
Absolutely. And I work with a lot. We have libraries in my son's name in Rwanda. We have 65 Eric Harms libraries in Rwanda. And they were my best grief counselors because they did lose everything. I mean, if you look back on the 1994 genocide, I work with people that have lost their entire families and all of their possessions, and they were killed by their neighbors. I mean, if you can imagine that. So
Wow.
I've had the incredible honor of working with a lot of people, and I mean they worked with me. I mean they did a lot more for me than I did for. I brought them books. They brought me my life. It's great experience. So I've been around people that have lost everything, and I think that because when you are in that pit and you're sucking up the mud, you feel as if you're going to be there forever. That's natural. That's the natural feeling. You're going to be there forever. My best advice or suggestion to anyone is to just fight it. And by fighting it, it means, for me anyway, and everyone's different. I think it's important to know everyone's grief journey is different. People they express grief in a different way and go through grief in a different way. But I had to force myself because the natural tendency is just to kind of just stay in bed all day. You gotta, especially as a widow, I could stay in bed all day. I'm a retired widow. I could stay in bed all day. I don't have to get up. I could stay in my apartment, lock the door, and never go out. My suggestion would be to kind of lift, know that it's a fight, know that it's not going to come naturally. Because if you think you're just going to wait it out, that doesn't happen. It's kind of, I always thought wanted to be like Rip Van Winkle and, go to sleep and then wake up in 20 years and be fine. It
Mm.
doesn't happen. So fight it and go out and find something useful. And when I say useful, sometimes it's just helping other people. You can volunteer somewhere if you don't, if you, for me, I'm out here helping out my kids and my grandkids. I'm writing books, I'm doing other things. I'm helping in my church. And my faith really is I'm just as a Christian, it's between me and God. I think that's my belief. It's between me and God. So I grew up Catholic. My husband was a Baptist. I was a Baptist. I was a Methodist. I'm looking at a Methodist church here. I was Presbyterian. None of that to me matters. It's between me and God and what a community of some sort. I find it in my faith community, but you can find it in other communities. A community of some sort does give you that sense of purpose. And for me, churches are just communities that just kind of help you in your journey. And what denomination to me doesn't make any difference. Um, so find a community, find some place, someone you can help, because one of the best things you can do to increase your joy is to be helpful. When you're helpful to other people, it's an amazing combination, because when you help other people, it comes right, but your endorphins increase too. So it's like a win-win situation. You help them and it comes back and hits you right in the face. So understand it's a battle. It's not going to happen by itself, and fight it, because it's worth the fight. I've lived in fear and I don't ever want to go back. And I'm sure I'm gonna go through dips in my life again. I'm 68. I've got a lot of family. They're starting to die. Some of them are in their 90s. I'm losing them one by one. I know my time is going to come. It's going to be hard, but know it's a battle and know it's a fight, and do what you can to help other people. That's the best way you can help yourself to get out.
I think all those areas are amazing, and it's interesting because I've had conversations. Well, first of all, a lot of the people who've had near-death experiences, they come back, and a lot of times one of the messages I get is that we take stuff so serious here. They come back with this newfound, because when they pass on and they have an experience, some of them do, they find their soul family. And that could be
Mhm.
past loved ones, it could be whatever they see. Everyone's got different experiences. But then they come back and they realize that we're all kind of characters in a play. And what I mean by that, it's not to respect who we are and what we are doing here. But if you think about it, it's the same sense of, I've said this to, I coach music for a living, and I talk to a lot of teenagers.
Mhm.
And this might hit home a little bit for you with what happened to your son, but I've had teenagers coming in with tons of trauma and drama from their peers. And, oh, I broke up and I don't think I can deal with this, or all these things. And sometimes I'll just have these little conversations, and it's almost like I try to just sprinkle it in there. I don't demand what they should do, but I say, I'll talk about their childhood, and I'll say, 5 years ago, that person you're talking about right now didn't exist in your life. You had other people that were in your life at the time. When you were born, you were alone until you seen your mom. And then she was the first person that was important to you. And then you built relationships. And they kind of look at me sometimes like, okay, where are we going with this? But the point is try to say, you're putting so much merit on one relationship or one friendship or one situation that went the wrong way. And people are going to come and go. And that's part of like the human experience. The beautiful part is that you can restart at any time. So if someone is feeling lost or alone, you can go out and restart. And I know it takes a lot of will, especially if someone's going through hell and they got to get out of it. But the point is that we've done this before from birth. And to not get lost in your current situation doesn't mean you don't have to grieve that person or respect that they were so important to you in your life, but you have to keep going. You have to keep fighting. And that's what you touched on all that here. So do you agree with that? That's kind of where I go with people, is to try to say, now that could be just the willpower of myself. And maybe a lot of people struggle with the willpower to do that. But it's to try your best to not take life so serious, because from what from what I'm seeing, as we get closer to that time in our own lives and we have our own spiritual experiences and we have our own belief systems, we start to realize, oh, we're all just lined up for the same, we're all in a line, and at any point, we're at the front of the line, and we get to experience what everyone gets to experience at the end of their line. So I just didn't know if that relates to anything that you believe, or yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm going to use that advice about the relationships with I have 12-year-old twin granddaughters who, are just starting to experience some girl drama, as you know,
Hmm.
like Oh my gosh. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use it. That's fabulous.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of feel, okay, for me, the purpose in life, from a universal perspective, no matter what your belief is, that we're all here on this earth to just help each other get through. We're just, we're all here and we're going through this process, and there's something else. I believe there's something else. And I some people don't. But if you don't believe there's something else, it's even more important to leave your legacy now, because then there's nothing else. But I just think we're here to help each other out and any way we can. And in my situation, it happens to be I had a lot of loss, so I'm trying to help people out that have suffered loss. You might have something. You're in music, you're helping young. It's really hard for me with young kids because of my son, and I just want to build resilience. I mean, that's my poor grandkids are probably getting a little overdosed on resilient, lessons in resiliency, because I had that trauma.
Right.
Uh, so yes, I think we're all here to help each other out. And what you said was exactly right. Relationships come and go, jobs come and go, our system in life, we go to school, we work, we retire. Some of us fail retirement. I'm a failure. I had to go and find a job. I'm writing and doing other things because that's just what I need. And other people will do retirement differently. But we just need to know we go through phases, and we just have to address each phase, each new identity as kind of a challenge to, okay, what do I do now? And let me go find a way to go through it and live, as purposeful a life as I can.
Did you ever have with the losses that you've gone through and finding your own willpower seems to be coming through to me that to keep pushing, keep fighting. And you can share this if you're comfortable.
Yes.
Did you ever have any situation through any of the losses where you got a little bit of a knock on the door or an experience that allowed you to realize that they're okay? We all have these experiences, spiritual experiences, transformative experiences, NDEs, you name all these different things. I'm just curious if there's any experience that you had that was kind of profound that you'd be willing to share. It just gives insight for people to know that our loved ones are okay.
Absolutely. Now, my husband seemed to be a little more connected with those things than I did. My girls, so both of my daughters had dreams about my son, very vivid dreams in which he was wearing something that they didn't know he had, that I knew he had, so there was, there in each of the dream, there was something that was unusual that
Hmm.
struck me. I had one experience where I was waking up, and all of a sudden the phone rang, and I answered the phone, and he said, "Hi, Mom." And as a parent, you can tell how your child is from the first syllable they utter.
Hmm.
This the first syllable. And that was it. I'm like, Eric, Eric, right? And that was all I got. That was it. However, I had three people from three. We had a student at Columbia, a student went to his high school with him and was now in New Orleans, a Loyola in New Orleans. And then my niece, all three of them, completely unconnected, didn't know each other, had a dream, exact same dream, where Eric came in. Now, he was kind of a Robin Williams type,
Hmm.
very, very funny. He was a kind of a genius. He was just very funny, and, jazz pianist, all those things, very, very, uh, just would do things impulsive, very impulsive, which of course was part of the downfall because he had 45 minutes from the breakup. That was impulsivity wasn't so good. But he used to do a jig. He used to do like the Eric jig. That was kind of his thing. All three of them talked about a dream, and two of them didn't know about the jig. One did. Said he did his jig. He was in white. He was glowing, and he said, "Mom, I tell my parents this was an accident," and there were some accidental things that might have happened at the time. "It was an accident. I'm so sorry. They had nothing to do with it. There's nothing they could have done. I'm so sorry. And I'm fine." And they all had the same exact dream. And they
Wow.
told me different periods. In fact, the last time I was told that was when my husband was getting surgery. He was getting open heart surgery a year or so after Eric died. And it was my niece, who was a nurse at Mayo Clinic, who came in as we were waiting for the surgery. And she just said, I wasn't going to tell you about this, but this happened afterwards. I wasn't sure what to say. And I kind of feel now's a good time. And she told me that. See, so she told me that, no, see, he was only supposed to be in surgery for 4 hours, and this was hour 10. So I was a little worried. I
Yeah.
was, was kind of anxious. And she told me that story, and I knew of the other two, and it just kind of helped me realize I felt like Eric was saying, "Okay, Mom, everything's going to be okay." I also had something that did happen to me that was unbelievable. I had a colleague. I don't know if you know who Tony Dungy is. He was a Super Bowl winning coach. He was a very famous football coach. His brother Lyndon, but Tony lost his son to suicide about the same age after a breakup. So similar situation. And his brother Lyndon was a dentist who worked down the street from us and an acquaintance at the time, but now a dear friend. And he started writing us letters after all this. You know, we would write him and put him in the mail, and they were just so helpful. And I was having a meltdown. I know anyone that's had a loss knows that, you know, you can kind of get through the day and all of a sudden something hits you and you just meltdown.
Mhm.
I was having a meltdown. I was in the hallway, up the stairs of my dental office, you know, patients in the chair, my dental assistant's taking care of them. And it was someone that he knew that was, you know, telling, you know, just something hit me. And I was in the hallway and I was just crying in just a sense I couldn't stop. I was just, and I thought, where is he? Where is he? Where is he? Because also it's a suicide. So, you
Right.
know, you kind of, where is he? And two of my employees were with me, one who had also lost her son to suicide after the breakup with a girlfriend. So there's the best support I could get was right in there. But I was just crying. Just couldn't breathe. And all of a sudden, my office manager ran in to me and handed me, she goes, Lyndon just came here. So this dentist felt the urge all of a sudden at his dental office, very busy, to write this letter and not just put it in the mail, but hand deliver it to me in his busy day. And it said, and as a Christian, this is not a biblical verse, it's not angels or demons or anything can separate you from the love of God. It was a quote that he had highlighted exactly what I need to hear. Basically, it says he's okay. You know, to me,
Mhm.
he's up with God. He's okay. And to me, it was like a direct line, you know, direct,
Right.
like, Kim, knock it off. You know,
Right. Yeah.
he's fine. He's with me. And I just want to say something about suicide because you might have some people out there too that are people of faith with suicide. There's been such a change. When my mother died, no one would give her, she was Catholic, nobody would give her a funeral. She couldn't go to a church. She was buried, you know, I remember being in the mortuary and just dripping with shame, you know. And she was the most lovable, loving, kind, caring, godly woman I'd ever met in my life, but nobody would give her a funeral. When my son died, we were Baptist. He went to a Catholic school, high school. He wasn't in the Catholic school. He was in college.
Mm.
But the church, the Baptist church, had all the pastors up there talking about suicide, talking about Eric, you know, honoring him. The school had, it was a boys' military camp, so they all had uniforms and stuff on. The school sent buses to a Baptist church, a Catholic school sent buses to a Baptist church for a kid that didn't go there anymore. It was at college on a school day. The church was packed. It was a big church anyway. It had hundreds of kids, hundreds of boys, packed to the gills. We talked openly about suicide. We talked about grace. We talked about, you know, we all felt we knew where he was. And then at the end of that time, when Eric's casket was being brought down the aisle, those boys, and it just makes me, I get goosebumps thinking about those boys, those beautiful, beautiful high school boys in their dress uniforms, lined the hall, hundreds of them, and saluted Eric's casket as it was. It makes me just want to cry to think about it.
Wow.
As it was going down the aisle, they honored who he was because he made more of a difference in 19 years than many of us do in our
Yeah.
whole life. And so I want to just put that out there that the faith community is has changed considerably from 35 or 45 years ago when my mom died. And that is so helpful to me because that really just to know he was loved, to know that the Catholic priest, it was one of his friends at church was a Catholic. They called him the dancing bear because he was also the drum major and he would dance up there and he would just
Mm.
make it. The football players were jealous because people would cheer the band more than the team. So it was, you know, it was one
Right.
of those things. And he came up to me and he was dying. He had oxygen. He said to me, Kim, I know I'm going to see him real soon and I'll
Mm.
give him a hug. And so those are the types
Wow.
of things when you're a person of faith that you need to help you get through this. And I was fortunate to have that. So if there are people out there that are especially going through a suicide, I just hope they know they're not, whatever happened, suicide is not a rational act for anything. There's nothing that causes that. It's something that they decide on their own. So just, I want to get rid of the shame. I want to get rid of the guilt and just know that you are not responsible for someone else's suicide.
I haven't had anyone really bring that up on any
Mhm.
shows. Um, the idea like suicide does come up not too often, probably because it's a very delicate subject for a lot of people. So I appreciate you saying that because you're right. Years ago, it was treated with such almost in a way disrespectful to even the person's life because they still live something. There's still something that happens there at the end, and we all go for different reasons. But the hope is that understanding anyone who's in that place, though, understanding that there are people out there. And the other thing I was gonna say is the kids, the people who are honoring them, the classmates and things, they probably were coming from a lot of places of, I mean, it's adolescence is very difficult. So, I'd gone and seen a movie with my girlfriend. We had seen the Inside Out 2 movie because we really wanted to see it. And I remember we went in and I felt, there was all ages there, but I was more in the older category. There was kids that were like 12, 15, 17. And I remember I was sitting there and there was a delicate part in the movie where, and I'm not going to give away the movie in case anyone hasn't seen it, but it was really around the idea of adolescence and how it can really affect us and our anxiety and things like that. And I looked to my right during this really emotional state, and there was what looked like a 17-year-old boy who looked like the typical jock, the typical uh, kid that maybe plays sports, doesn't show too much emotion, and he's getting emotional. I can see it in his face. He's glued to the screen and he's looking emotional. And I was like, what a powerful movie. And I'm not here to plug Inside Out 2, but it's powerful when you have something where kids can see that everyone goes through a lot of the same challenges. So back to your son, there's probably a lot of kids who I don't want to say can relate, but can understand how something can happen where
Mhm.
their emotions get the better of them and things happen and then there's accidents that can happen. And so I think that was a beautiful part of what you said because it shows that everyone understands how vulnerable we are as humans
Yeah.
because it can really happen to anyone and you can still respect that life. So
Especially with these boys, when there were several people, there were thousands of people at his funeral, this little 19-year-old kid,
mm,
and there were several parents that said, my son is off at college and he just broke up with his girlfriend and he's in bad shape and we didn't really think about it, but I think we're going to go pay him a visit. I mean,
right.
we
Yeah.
they can tough it through and they're very vulnerable. And he was, and as a musician, part of the thing that made him such a great jazz pianist, he was a fabulous pianist, was that impulsiveness and that sensitivity.
Mm,
And they just combined into a fatal cocktail. 45 minutes, he didn't have time to even think about this.
yeah.
Um, so I hope that again, and I've been there. I've been in that place when I was a teenager. When you're in there, you just feel that there's so much pain that you just want to get out, and that's the only way you happen to see. So it's not about anybody else but the pain. You want to free yourself from that pain, and I think it's important for people to understand that because the effect is awful to everybody else. I mean, it was I can't even describe, how it just, we just exploded. It's just an awful thing, the repercussions. But I know that at the time they're basically just thinking about, I just want to get rid of this pain. It's too much.
Yeah, and we talk about adolescents going through it, but at any age, we can go through this pain of the loss, right? And I know you said it exactly. I don't get too personal all the time, but when you're in that darker place and you want to escape,
Yeah.
that's the place where I would say to everyone, that's when you want to reach out as quick as you
Yeah.
can, reach out to that person you think that is there for you. There's always someone. And if there's nobody, you call someone that you can, you can even call the police, I believe. I'm sure you can call different places that'll just get someone to talk to you because it's important to know that you're not all by yourself. And I want to say also with what you went through and this is your son we're talking about. So it's very vulnerable of you to speak around it because you're bringing your own personal space into other people's lives, but it's really powerful too. So I really do appreciate that. And I haven't had too many of these type of conversations. Some of the some of the near death experiences are quite, some of them are even humorous, really, the way people have these experiences, and because they tend to come back from their experience, and like I said earlier, they realize that they were kind of doing things a little bit wrong, you know? Maybe they were in a job that they were putting all their attention in, that they thought that's what life was the material. And material is important. It's important because we don't want to be stressed, right? If we don't have the life we want to live, or we don't have enough money to make ends meet, that's stressful. So that also affects our body and our health. So it's this challenge that we continuously have here. But I also think sometimes we put a little bit too much into that. So to always
Mhm.
have that space of gratitude of, hey, I'm just here and the people around me are here and I need to appreciate that. And it's difficult when you're stuck in, and you've had professional careers where you probably know exactly what I mean, where you're just, you're expected to show up for other people all the time outside of your family doing the work you did, right? You said in dental, right? So I just, just a good reflection, a good storyline to really, for people to really take back. I want to know, this book you wrote, just do
Mhm.
people, because you said you work with death and grief, is there a way people can contact you or get in touch with you? Is it through an author's website? I'm just wondering if you can give some information on that.
They go to my website, which is drkimberlyharms.com. The book, there's a link for the book, and the book goes over building legacy is the first part. The second part is death and dying, talks about near death experiences, talks about what percentage of people believe you're going to go to a good place, maybe go to a bad place, maybe go no place. It just describes a lot about death because we don't like to talk about it. And I think it's a fascinating topic. If you just ask, if you ever sit at a table and ask, what do you think happens after you die? And you do it in a non-judgmental manner, you wouldn't believe the answers you get. It's fascinating.
Hmm.
And the last part is, as I'm aging, 68, I see around me people that died without preparing. And I think that my job between menopause and death is I got to prepare for that death part so that my children have a softer landing. And by doing that, I have in the book a whole checklist of the stuff you got to get done. Get your will in order, get your trust if you need it, get all your passwords down, do all the things so that when you go, it's going to be a simple opening a big binder with everything in it. So your kids don't have to go searching through your whole entire house to find all your stuff, which is going to cause more confusion and conflict on top of the grief they're already suffering.
Right.
But then also the greatest love letter of all time was written to be delivered after Saint Valentine died, right? So that what look at that impact. So I write Valentines to all my kids. It's in my book so that when I pass away, as they get their book, everything's in there with the titles to my cars, my birth certificate, everything they'll ever need to settle anything is in that book. And then I have little Valentines for them. So when they open the book, I hope they think, oh, my mom loved me. Look what she did. She put this book together. She loved me so much. She got this all so I wouldn't have to go searching through all her stuff. But then if they don't quite get that, if they don't really get them, they'll find the love letter. So like you can't take anything, there's some things you can't put to chance. So this way you're going to let them know you love them from beyond the grave. And I think that
Right.
many of the people that come back from near death experiences say, really it's all about love. It's about loving people and giving love and supporting people. So you can give your love from beyond the grave by putting together this legacy book. And I have templates because sometimes people don't like to write. I have templates for legacy letters, legacy love letters, apology letters, get your emotional stuff in order, reconciliation letters, all kinds of things, making videos so that you have a little heritage. They could talk about, we have one of my husband's mom talking about riding in a sleigh through Saskatchewan with potatoes in her pockets to keep her hands warm to get to school. Those things are priceless. Those
Hmm.
things are treasures. And we need to start thinking about them. And the problem I think that we have, first of all, is we procrastinate. But secondly, we don't like to think about our death. We kind of think that if we just eat right and we exercise and we do all the things we're supposed to do, which is good because then you leave more legacy because you live longer. But eventually, it's going to catch up. So I think we need to prepare and prepare before we're sick because once you get sick, it's very hard to do it, and it's hard for the family to talk about all these things because you think maybe they're looking they're admitting that you're going to die, which you might not want to. And so basically, I think we need to prepare for our deaths so that our children are in better shape.
I look at like prevention. You're preventing things from getting I'm big in prevention just in health too, right? So like you said, if you want to live a longer life, we do prevention's a lot easier than trying to heal something after you're dealing with the fire. Putting out the fire is a lot harder than uh, making sure there's no fire that starts. And the same thing with, and that's including the people you're leaving behind because you want to give them, you don't want there to be a huge fire once you go. You want them to be able to kind of tame it. So I love that. There was just, I was going to mention one quick thing. There was this video went around, and I don't know why I bring humor into everything, but there's this video that went around. I wish I could remember who it was, but there was this man that had passed, and he had set up in his with his sons that when he passed, they were going to put this audio into his casket as they lowered it. And the audio as it's going down, he starts knocking. Hey, and he starts yelling, let me out. Well, you got all these, there's this video of this casket going down, and and that was his humorous, that was his personality. So you got all these people crying around this lowering of the casket, and you see their energy shift. As much as some people probably thought it was distasteful, everyone's energy went from grief to laughing, and it brought that person's energy back out. So we're all different, right? You talked about making this book of love stories or of Valentine's and things like that, and that could be you. Someone else might leave something else. So that's what I mean. But again, I just want to preface this by saying I really think faith is huge in it all. And some people might disagree with me on that. I have to stick with this because if we have that faith already in place, it's so much easier to work through those things, to work through what you're leaving behind, right?
You have that sense that it's a path because when you're in that pit, you're lost. I mean, you're
Mm,
lost, fearful. You feel like you don't even nothing's working. And it's nice to have a path. It's nice to look through whatever faith it is and have a guide to help you move forward because most faiths will include that. They'll include how to manage grief and how to deal with it and our purpose, which having a purpose and you don't have to win a Nobel Prize or make a lot of tons of money or just enough to get by. But our purpose, really, all of us have the purpose to love each other.
mm,
That's pretty simple and everybody can do it. So, I think sometimes, especially I notice at my age when some of my fellow widows feel like, oh my gosh, I've never done anything in my life. Well, yeah, you did. You were married for so many years. You did that. You're giving love out. You just need to give out love. You don't have to, start raking up points as far as how much money you made or what job you had and when you retire it doesn't matter what job you had. I mean, you mentioned earlier, should I call you Dr. Harms? I said, well, that really only mattered if I had a drill in my hand and I was going to work on your teeth.
right.
When you're retired, we are all the same. We just start all over again. It doesn't matter what you did in your life.
Mm,
We just deal with interactions with people, and I think it's important to remember that as you go through your life.
yeah. I've loved this. This has been an amazing conversation. This wouldn't be a soul inspired talk unless I ended it with this. You kind of spoke on this, and I usually like to leave the episode by asking if you can dig in even further into what comes to you in your heart when I ask, what is from a all humans, what is our main reason as to why we come here and incarnate? What is that? What comes to you when you feel that?
After all this stuff, I told you the things that I've been through at 68 years old. At this point in my life, I feel that we are just here together it, to love each other and to help each other through, to help each other move forward, to look, okay, this person was able to get through that because we're learning. I think we're supposed to be learning some things. Um, but I just think we're just here to help and to love each other. That really is all we need to do. And there's such joy that comes from that. It really is a back at you kind of thing, whatever you give, you get back. Um and I am so grateful that I kind of discovered that maybe in the last 20 years or so. I lived a
Mm,
long time. I lived a lot of my life in fear, technically, but um but I wish I could have, if I could have redone my life, I just would have found that out a little earlier because I did a lot of worrying over the little things, a lot of um, uh, worry and concern and sadness. Sadness is always going to be there, but I think the biggest thing is just to love and to be present with people, to be there for them, and just to help one another as we journey through.
Wow. Well, I can say probably this for a lot of our audience that you're very strong to have gone through the loss you have. And I think just watching your resilience and seeing the strength that you have, and on top of it, and I know that's not why you're doing this, but it's to show that you can do that. Like you can be in that place instead of the opposite, which isn't where any of us want to be. And no one wants to feel alone. So if anyone does feel that, reach out to someone and try to get yourself out of there. It's not like you're gonna just get out of there and be everything's gonna be great. It's gonna
No,
take time and it's gonna take effort. But the more people you have there holding your hand a little bit, it definitely can help you along the way a little bit easier. And then you all of a sudden you look back and you go, wow, well that was a big thing in my life, but now I'm here. What life is. We just keep going until that's why this is why I strongly believe we continue on to something else because I always look at it if we were like ants and you're to step back and watch all the things we do. What are we doing? Why do we go to churches? Why do we look for faith? Why do we look for religion? Why do we look for spirituality? Why is that happening from an outside perspective? Because I think we have a trajectory towards something. We just don't know what that something is. I don't think we're meant to. Otherwise, what would the purpose of what we're doing be? It gets very complicated. And some of the conversations we have here do get a little bit out there. But I've really appreciated your time. So thank you so much, Kim, for coming on. I
thank you,
always
Joe.
I always reach out to the audience to say, please continue to like, share, and subscribe to the Soul Inspired so we can get these messages out to as many people as possible. And this is a big one. So if you know someone who could hear this message today, I'd appreciate, I'm sure Kim would appreciate for you to share the video so that people can reflect on their own life and get the help, that they deserve. So thank you so much, Kim, for being on
Thank
Soul
you.
Inspired.